good afternoon from St. Paul, Minnesota at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub. It's USCHO Live Thursday at the 2024 Frozen Four. I'm Ed Tresker alongside Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley. What a beautiful day for hockey. It's a great day for hockey, right?
We've heard that a few times, and yes, it certainly is, and it's time to at least get four teams back on the ice. I always like this break that we get between the regionals and the Frozen Four. It gives you some time to do some planning and not have to jump, right into travel mode after you go through the regionals. But sometimes the break feels too long, and I just want to see some hockey tonight. Get these four teams out here. These are four of the best teams you've ever had in one Frozen Four. It's time to just let's go.
And the energy here is off the charts, especially, in this bar right now. When you're talking Hockey City, you got a bar named after hockey. You got Zamboni's down the street. You got this area here around the arena. I mean, the state of hockey. This is one of the places that's made for the Frozen Four, and here we are. You've got top seeds. You've got the Blue Bloods. You've got the return of all these teams. The only thing that's, like we said yesterday, it's lacking is a North Dakota presence or the Gophers or a team from Minnesota, or it'd be even better. But it's, like you said, it is go time, and it is one of these that you just want to drop the puck and get playing. And you're walking the streets this morning and you see a lot of red. Denver red, Boston College red, Boston University red, and
the Maize and Blue is the only uniqueness here.
Yeah, and we were filming our pre-show at the Herb Brooks statue, and you got the Maize and Blue coaches walking down the street, and it's just time to go and time to play, and I think it'll be fun today.
I actually really like, and this is part of being in the Central Time Zone, and it'll be even better on Saturday, but the earlier game times. If we're in the East Coast, I was scrolling back through my Facebook timeline. Boston back in 2015, the game times I think were 5:30 and 8:30 or 5:30 and 9 maybe.
And if overtime, it's even later.
Right, and here we are. We'll get underway at 4 o'clock today, and the second game, if on time, 7:30. That's really two perfect game times. I think the players like playing in those types of time slots. I don't think they love waiting till 8:30 or 9 o'clock to get on the ice for their game. So it works perfectly. And then a national title game will be played at 5 o'clock local time. That's fantastic as well.
Makes me wonder about when we're in Vegas. Will we have really early times for East Coast television?
I mean, I remember Anaheim, and it was that was a 12 o'clock start time of the national championship game. 12 o'clock local, which makes sense. And 3 o'clock for the East Coast. So. Yeah, well, we might see some really early game times out there. And that is, you've got to testify to this, Derek. As a coach, you might be playing at 1 o'clock. That really throws you out of your routine a little bit.
And one of the things that you talk about when you go to the coaches convention, you want to keep one of the bigger things that happened in the regionals, we were seeing sometimes noon starts, and way back when there were some 11:30 starts for TV, and coaches really wanted to get away from that because you don't play that during the year. I think one time that we played a morning game for kids. One time we played a 1 o'clock game. Very rarely do you play games this early. So
right.
Even today at 4 o'clock, I don't know how many times teams have played 4 o'clock games this year. Maybe a handful. So you want to try to keep it as normal as possible. So I think there isn't an advantage to the teams that are playing later today, because they do get to keep on a more normal schedule.
Right.
So the teams that are playing earlier, getting up earlier, their days are adjusted. I think you're going to see them potentially have a little bit of a adjustment period into the game. You're not going to have as many people into the game early because the late game crowd will be late arriving. So there will be a little bit of an adjustment to that early game. So when you're talking Vegas and you're talking all the other ones, we'll try to be as normal as possible. And normal here is a 4:30 and 7:30 start.
Yeah, I think that for the players, as you say, keeping in your routine is important. But you also have to worry about two games on the same day. We could always go back to the 70s when they played one game Thursday, one game Friday, and then the national championship game on Saturday.
You're getting out of control right now.
You talk about
never getting that back.
You talk about routine, though. That it's inevitable that there are a lot of things that disrupt the routine. You've been into NCAA regionals. You have all the press conferences and the different timings. Plus, even when you get to the game, I was reminded of this in Sioux Falls. It's almost like being at an NFL game when you see a lot of standing around with all those extra TV timeouts that happen during the game. There are a lot of things that are a little different on this stage.
Well, the Big Ten especially, because the Big Ten right now are the one media timeout. Or I don't even know if the Big Ten has a media timeout.
They're the one at the mid-break. Yeah,
which is what Atlantic Hockey has, a 1 minute at the mid-break. But they also only have a 12-minute intermission. Now they're going 17-minute intermissions, but they're also going the 3 at 15, 10, and 5, and they're doing 2-minute breaks for TV. And sometimes, as you know, Jimmy, working the production, those 2-minute breaks are
long.
End up being they're not 2 minutes long. They're 2 minutes and 30 because they come back at 2 and they have the graphics. So something to watch for is how much the fourth line is used. And I watched Michigan practice yesterday, and Michigan only had 22 skaters on the ice, which I thought was really a low number for them because most teams, they carry up to 29 total, 30 total players. And I thought they had 25 total with their 3 goalies, and I thought that was low. And I think that if you really want to, you could really shorten your bench in these games. So the fourth line is really not going to play very much, and I think that tends to, you're going to see the star players play a lot more. So when there's a 2-minute intermission, or a 2-minute break every 5 minutes, you're going to see the big guns come. So expect to see the star players playing a lot more and featuring, you're seeing a lot of the feature players playing a lot more.
Does that give more of an advantage to Michigan, which is used to having just the one media timeout, as opposed to the others that are used to having 3?
No, I think it would be the other way around. Michigan they would have to rely on 4 lines because they're constantly playing.
But what I mean is they're going to get their first line out there more often than they normally have.
Yeah, they will, but they're also, so is BU. You're going to see a lot of 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, and then you can go back 1 versus 1 and then expect immediate timeout. And you're seeing a lot of, and if you watch the regionals, you'll see a lot of the media timeouts come with 2 minutes left in the period, a minute left in the period. How many times do you see a media timeout come with
inside the final minute?
Inside the final minute of a period.
Most leagues don't allow that during the regular season.
Yeah.
You lose the TV timeout.
Yeah.
Here it's different.
But you saw it, I think you saw it in the one game where you had to pull the goalie. There was a 2-minute media timeout, and then they came back with the goalie empty.
That's right.
And then they used the timeout. So you're going to see the best players play even more, which I think that tends to lead towards the best guys. And I think right now you're talking BCBU.
Well, you certainly have the horses on those teams. That's a big part of it.
Hey, we got TV in here filming right now. It's this, like I said, this might be ESPN here. We might be on national right now.
You never know. I go back to a team a long time ago, 2015 BU's team, and they would always make the most of their best player, Jack Eichel. And he, in a given game, might take 75% of the faceoffs because of TV timeouts. Every time there was a TV timeout, there was no doubt afterwards David Quinn was rolling back with that Jack Eichel line. So you knew that. So that's the type of situation you're in here that you kind of think about. That's something you have to really think about as a coach, is the strategy of what lines you put out every time you come out of a TV timeout.
Well, let me ask you about this. If you are the home team in these games, as BC and BU will, and you get the last change, how much does that help you out in addition to the timeouts?
A lot.
Yeah, 100%.
Tons.
You're gonna try to get the matchup you want. You're gonna go into it with, hey, I want to play these guys against these guys. And once again, you feel bad for the bottom end of your lineup because you're not gonna use them as much as you could. And with all the media, like I said, these timeouts, they're in regular season play, they are legitimate 1 minute media timeouts.
Right.
They are legit. These 2 minute media timeouts, they are 2.5. They're 2:40.
Yeah, you're definitely buffered from 10 seconds on the end of each one, so that's going to be 2:20 minimum.
Yeah, it's because you're leaving the 10 seconds out.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big things with the coaches convention is can they tighten up those 2 minute media timeouts because of
really tough.
And it is. You're in the production truck or the production with ESPN. Like, what's the average? What would you say? 2:30 probably.
I will say that when we get to this point, because it is actually the NCAA that's running the timeout process. You have an off-ice official, a true former referee, usually in the box, running the TOC, timeout coordination. So they do try to keep them pretty strict. But I'm still saying that they'll give you the first 10 seconds, to get the announcers to break, then turn the red light on, then you flash it with 30 seconds left. That's when they're actually coming back on TV. So that's 90 seconds. That's when the players are supposed to come away from their benches. Then you get another 30, but you really probably get another 35, 40. So it does become pretty long, these timeouts. They have shortened them. They used to be 2.5 not too long ago. Now they've gone back to 2. So it does a lot. It does a lot to really give you some rest when you don't expect it.
So expect to see Lane Hudson. Expect to see Celebrini. Expect to see Gauthier. Expect to see the best players
the freshman line for BC.
Yeah. Will Smith. Expect to
if
see.
you're on the fourth line today, 9 minutes is probably a lot of play time.
Oh, that's normal.
That's 6 then?
Yeah. 9 minutes is normal for a fourth line probably.
And your top D is probably going to play close to 29?
Well, you know what? It depends. Are you dressing 13 forwards? Are you dressing 7D? You're probably getting the 7th D is probably going to get about 4 to 5 minutes now. And you're probably going to get with power play penalty kill. Your ice is really cut down. You're probably getting 6 minutes if you're a fourth line. If there's a lot of power play penalty killing, it could even decrease from there.
So here's another question for you. Denver, they probably are going to dress 13 forwards, right?
We talked about that last night. We would think with Rizzo, you don't want to end up having him not be able to go as much as possible and be down to 11. I would think only they know how healthy he is. I mean, you could end up saying that he's coming back, but they know where he's at. They know how he's going to be. But one hit, does anybody really know what is wrong with him?
No.
So so that's where you're at. So they should. That's a good call. They're probably going to go 13 forwards.
Otherwise, do you expect? I mean, what have you seen typically? I think I've seen probably 80% of the time or more coaches using 7 defensemen because if you lose a defenseman to an injury or a penalty, you still have 6.
I always felt like our teams play better when we dress. There's more competition really up front. There's more competition up front, but we always play better with 7D because it's tough to get that extra forward in because when let's just say you're got 4 guys on a fourth line. That fourth line, when does that extra guy ever get to play? He's getting 2 shifts a period.
Right.
I mean, so why even bother? Or why dress somebody and not even play him? And, hey, look at Tim Brule from USCHO there. All of your bosses there getting on some camera time here.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
The famous people, you never know.
That's a face for radio, that's for sure.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back with our first guest. You're listening to USCHO Live Thursday at the 2024 Frozen Four in St. Paul. Welcome back to USCHO Live Thursday at the Frozen Four in St. Paul. We're at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub. Fans from all the different teams getting ready for two great games going on today. I'm Ed Trepsker alongside Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley. And Jim, why don't you do the honors as we get to today's first guest?
Yeah, we joke all the time that the college hockey commissioners world is getting younger and younger all the time, and one of the newest faces that we get to welcome in, Doug Christiansen from the ECAC. Welcome. How has year one been in your role as ECAC commissioner?
It's been great. I've really enjoyed myself. I've learned a lot. It's a phenomenal league for both men and women. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of success on the ice, but it's everything that goes into that. And for me personally, I have enjoyed trying to amplify what the students are doing and building on the foundation that Steve Hagwell laid, which was tremendous.
Well, you just mentioned the name of a legend in this business. Big shoes to fill. Knowing Steve Hagwell, he probably is one of those guys that stays out of the way, but I also guarantee he's very helpful to you in year one as well.
He's been fantastic. I mean, for me personally, coming back to the ECAC, so I played in the ECAC, there's a lot of things to learn. I mean, being at the USCHO, and as Derek and I know, we're working together with in Pittsburgh, there's so many different pieces in the USCHO. The hockey piece is similar, but it's all of the other parts. It's managing more of the budget, understanding the nuances of the NCAA, understanding the changing landscape of the NCAA. And also there's all the different pieces of learning the personalities, and that's something that Steve was really helpful with in terms of, okay, this athletic director really values this, and this is an angle to try to have a conversation with him that's going to resonate, or her. And so that part's been really good, and hopefully I haven't screwed it up too much, but it's been a lot of fun.
Obviously, you talked about the USHL, and we go way back from Pittsburgh and fall classics, and you trying to recruit players to the ECHL and different things like that. But talk about the premier developmental league in the USHL and being there, and the differences being in the front office there to come to a collegiate front office per se, and how the transition was from, like I said, the best developmental league in the United States, potentially in North America, to college hockey.
I'll take it one step further. I think the USHL is the best development league in the world, hands down. I don't think that there's a comparison for what it does for a person across the board. It is the epicenter, whether you are a billionaire or you have no means at all, whether you are a Hall of Fame hockey player, you want your kid to play in the USHL. And that's something that USA Hockey has done a really good job harnessing. It's something that the teams and the league has done a nice job harnessing as well. And then from the ECAC point of view, we're a little bit different. And how we're different is we're trying to find that exact excellence coming through that goes into the USHL, the high-end players. But we also have phenomenal institutions, so you can't just be a high-end player. You have to be a high-end player and a good student, and bringing that student athlete onto the ice and allowing them to go do what they do. I mean, obviously, Quinnipiac won the national championship last year. We had two teams that fall out last week. So we're having success on the national stage, and we have phenomenal student athletes. So it's fun for me to come into it and to get my hands into it and show what a great league it is.
So that was what you sold in your job interview last year this time?
For sure. I didn't leave anything out, did I? I probably had a couple other things. But it's the truth. I mean, it's one of those things where there's a changing landscape of hockey, but as you know, the ECAC is really what college hockey is designed to be. Great schools, great academics, competitive hockey, and the ability to win a national championship and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. And that's what we've really tried to do.
You mentioned two teams in the national tournament, Quinnipiac and Cornell. It looked maybe it could have been only one. And, you know, I guess the question to go with, you've got some really high-end teams in your league. The bottom, and I think some Ivy League schools still being hurt from COVID and what happened, having to skip a season, and even, you know, you look at some of the other schools, you know, that had to miss that season. How do you feel teams are bouncing back, and how do they build the bottom to bring the bottom back closer to the top to where it was maybe 8 years ago?
I mean, nobody knows the challenges more about COVID than schools, and understanding how you I mean, so many of our programs didn't play.
Yeah.
And that's hard from a development point of view. That's hard from a retention point of view. And there isn't, with the schools that we have, you just can't just drop people into Princeton and say, okay, this is going to the way it works. It's not the way that it works. And so that's going to take a little bit more time. But what I would say, though, is the beauty of our league, dating back to when I played, is there is an element that's similar, where if you get some high-end guys, they can really drive the bus for you, and it can be a separator. And if you look at Dartmouth this past year, so last year they didn't have a great year. They had the COVID issue, right? But they have an all-league goalie, a first-team all-league forward, and an all-league defensive. And they really were able to find ways to win those tight games against their direct competition in the league, and that put them into the top four in a home ice situation. And I think that the benefit our league has is every single coach can look at that and say, okay, that's a roadmap that I can follow, and therefore, you know what, it is cyclical in some ways. You find those players, and you keep those players. Obviously, Cooper Black signed an NHL contract, so that's the spot for them that they're going to have to fill. But I think that that's where our league can grow. I think to your point about the USHL before, attracting more players from the USHL to come through our league. And then also, you know, really making sure that we're forward thinking in terms of how can we be as attractive to an 18 and 20-year-old player to come to our league, and how can we just market it to those players. We as a league are trying to do that, and I'm sure every coach in our league is trying to do that.
You mentioned coaches. Your coaching brethren in the league keep getting younger. And that, I think, is a great thing for college hockey, that you know, legends are wonderful when you have them, but I think the new ideas, the new talent really goes a long way. Can you maybe just expound upon that a little bit and what you have in terms of these young, talented coaches?
Well, I mean, you look at, you know, Josh Howgie, my alma mater, Union. You've got Reed at Dartmouth. I mean, those are guys that are coming into roles that they finished fourth and fifth in our league. They've got the ability to shape a program, not just short term, but long term. And what I like about it, and obviously you got Mike Harder, who finished third in the league right there too. But what I've told all of them, and I've told some of the other ones, is we're all kind of in and around the same age. So let's just figure out a way for us to work together, because we might spend the next 10, 15 years of our lives together. And if we can be aligned, we're going to be in a really good spot as a league, because we'll all grow together. And if the ECAC brand is strong, the brand for Reed Cashman is going to be strong, so that when he's recruiting a player, Josh Howgie, Harder, whoever else you want to put into that group. And that part's fun for me. And you know, for me, if our coaches grow and develop and have a ton of success, it's great for our league to be able to sell that. Obviously, Rand Pecknall taking the program the way that he has, it's good for our whole league.
Doug, you just had a terrific conference tournament up at Lake Placid, and the league has made a commitment to continue there. Some conferences are looking at on-campus things. What makes Lake Placid special and compelling for ECAC hockey?
I mean, we're in Minnesota, we're in St. Paul. There's very few places in the United States that are a hockey city, hockey place. And Minnesota has a number of them. But you could argue that the home of hockey in the United States is Lake Placid. Lake Placid is special. There isn't one person who hears Lake Placid and doesn't think hockey. And so we have that. And the part that I like about it, and this has nothing to do with the actual hockey, it's a really nice place to be. So it's not that, you know, whether it's like you're going to Scottsdale or you're going to Myrtle Beach or whatever, you're going there not just for one thing, you're going there for a fun weekend. And so, like for my family, I've got 2 little children and a wife. My wife can go and do things with the kids. I could be doing hockey things, and as a family, we all meet, we go to the game, we have a good time. And I think Lake Placid is unique in that way. And I also think that it's a lot of it's the kind of thing that people can look forward to in the future. Whereas if you go on campus, you know, if you're a team and you're talking about goals going from the bottom to the top, you're probably not sitting there saying, if you finish 12th, we're going to try to win the national championship next year. You're going to say, well, you know, we're going to try to get home ice. We're going to try to get to Lake Placid. Well, that's a goal that you can have all year, where if you have it as a campus site, which is a great thing too, but if you have a campus site, you can't sit there and say, well, we're hoping we're going to play a home game, maybe against this team or maybe here. It's a nice goal that everybody can rally around, and it's something for us to build on.
And it helps that it's drivable from everywhere in your conference.
It is, although we had 10 inches of snow this year, so it was not drivable for the people who were there, which is great because they stuck around, but it prevented some people from coming that we would like to have had.
So Steve Hagwell always had this issue. I played for Mike Schaefer. I worked for Mike Schaefer. You haven't suspended Mike Schaefer yet.
No, I haven't. You know what? The thing is Schaefer, you know what you're going to get with Schaefer. Well, yeah, you know what you're going to get. He's going to be intense, and he's going to care. And you know what? He sits there and he says how good the league is. You know, he's in the NCAA tournament. First interview, he's talking about how good the league is, how the league prepared him to have the success that he did. But he's going to have that high standard of the league office too. He's going to ask us to do all the things that we can do to help his program and help the league. And you know what? I don't mind that. I like that. I like somebody who's pushing us to try to be better as a league. And he certainly does that. There's a couple others who do that too, but as I'm sure you do as well. But that's okay. That's, to me, when people are passionate and they care about the league, they're invested in the league, and by definition, that's going to make us better.
New building at Union, your alma mater?
New building at Union, which I think is going to be fantastic. You know, Achilles, I played there. I mean, this is dating me a little bit now, but almost 20 years ago, I was on the committee to try to get a new rink then.
Wow.
So, you know, but the one thing that I will say, and that I hope Union really captures this year, is that building, it doesn't need 12,000 people in there to be loud.
No.
It is loud, it is intimidating, and it's a tough place to play. And I really hope that carries over to the new building, so they get all the frills and all the fun stuff that they get, but they find a way to keep that intimidation factor.
I want to take a second here to kind of touch on some of the hot button topics of college hockey right now, college athletics. Obviously, transfer portal is a big topic these days, and some people, I know Derek and the Atlantic hockey coaches that we've talked to out here worry that they, you know, their programs become feeder systems for the Big Ten or the NCHC or something.
No.
Well, you have some concern.
I've never said that.
You haven't. But, you know, ECAC is probably not that far off that you have some of that issues. Now, I think the academic part of your league might separate you a little bit there, but is that a big concern from your coaches, your athletic directors, your presidents that you hear about day in, day out?
I go two ways on it. And we talked about this the other day on our coaches call. It hurts more to lose something that you have. And as a result of that, if you have a goalie, you have a defenseman that you really like, you develop, and he goes to another place, it hurts you. You feel that. Where the reward of picking up a player that comes to you somehow, you don't get that same level of exhilaration. You don't get that same level of pride. And the one thing that has happened is it's going both ways. You look at the programs, you have first-round draft picks in the portal. You have players who never would have been available to schools before, but they're available now. And it's because a player could, and I just saw a Michigan jersey, so I'll talk about Michigan. There's players who were great recruits who went to Michigan, and for whatever reason it didn't work. Well, those players are now available, and they never would have been available before. Those players can now come to Clarkson or Union or Princeton or wherever, or RMU or wherever it's going to go, because they're looking for something maybe different. And so as much as that pain that you have of losing that player, I think that there's an equilibrium that you're going to get to, because for the first time, those players who go to a program that maybe it didn't work out for whatever reason, you've built up a relationship with them through the recruiting process that they then wind up coming to you a year or two down the road. So I think it goes both ways.
What about name, image, likeness, and, you know, the thought of, it feels like almost professional hockey at some points where some schools have a lot of money to pay. I mean, you're talking about the Ivy League that don't even give scholarship. I mean, so there's a big disparity between, hey, we can give you $100,000 in scholarship and $100,000 in cash in an Ivy League school, saying, hey, we're only $90,000 to come here, but come play hockey for us.
I guess I look at it, it's a concern. There's no question across sports concern. The one thing that I would say, though, is that the big programs still have the same number of players in the power play, the same number of starts for a goalie, and the same number of pucks on the ice. And the top programs in the country, for a long time, have had top-end recruits. And at this stage, maybe they're drawing them a little bit more. And I think to your point that we were talking about the transfer portal, there's a risk there of, you know, luring people in a different way. But there's still a finite number of spots, and the recruits and the advisors and the people who are really in the people's circle who are making these decisions either in the transfer portal or in advance, it's a concern. But it's also something that I think eventually people will look at it and say, okay, are they getting that much better of a player? Because they're already getting really good players in the first place, right? Like Jack Eichel and Paul Correa played at big-time programs long before there was name, image, and likeness. And Wisconsin had Chris Chelios. I mean, for years and years and years, you could go through all the players. And so it's just a little bit different way of, adding those players to your roster.
Sooner or later, sometimes if the name, image, and likeness starts hitting like basketball or football, teams are going to run out of money, and then that's going to open up spots for other people to go other places.
I agree. And I also think that there's an element of, how much money really moves the needle. You brought up $100,000. Let's just talk. That's a real amount of money, right? But to a family that has played AAA hockey, they've done all these different things for years and years and years. If it's $5,000, if it's $10,000, like that's not moving the needle for somebody to make a decision.
Not even 1 year of.
So my point is like
one year. I got 3 that play in AAA hockey.
Exactly. Which is why, I don't even know how you afford shoes with that. But the point is like that. I think is the part that people we worry about. But I think, is it really separating, or is it just there's more payment going to players that might have already chosen those schools in the first place?
What do you see as any of the other big hot button topics that will come up this year in Naples? Always an interesting time for the scuttle.
You just wanted to put a ball on a tee there. You didn't want to.
No, I'll let you hit from the forward tees here. I don't mind.
No. I mean, I think a couple things. Obviously, the regional piece is something that people talk about all the time. Major junior is a piece that people talk about all the time. And those are big topics. And I think that. From an ECAC point of view, the regional part doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, given the building and things like that. And I empathize. I know you got Heather coming on next. I empathize with where she's coming from, where the Big Ten's coming from, and I think she understands. And I think that's a bit of a crossroads. But I think you look at the crowds that we had in the East last weekend, fantastic, fun buildings, and so I think that was good. And then the next part that I would say is in terms of major junior, I think it's a very, very complex and nuanced discussion. And I think a lot of people have the conversation at 30,000 feet, and that's not really where the conversation needs to go, because it needs to be involved in how does each individual situation potentially play out, and what are the positives and negatives of each of those situations. And I just think that that's something that we're taking a great amount of time and effort on to learn as much as we can, so that we can inform our coaches and administrators as best we can.
But it's been a while in college hockey since we've had something so easy to sensationalize in a headline. Hey, major junior going to be open to college players. That's all you have to write in one headline, and everybody all of a sudden says it's open, it's done. It's not even that close.
It's not that close. I think that the one thing that I would say is where sometimes you have to wonder where it's coming from and why it comes from that spot. And it's not just major junior, it's just topics in general, right? And I think that you see a lot of the podcasts. I can see why major junior wants this to happen. We can relieve their debt of the student packages that they have. Mm-hmm. So I can see where that happens. But again, it's going to be a conversation that we're going to have. And it's going to be a conversation that we're all going to continue to learn and evolve on. And I feel very, very good about where college hockey is right now. And I would make a strong argument that it's never been better. You look at that, we're attracting number one, number 2 overall from Canada to come to play college hockey. We are producing more NHL players than we ever have. We have graduation rates above 90%. Like, what are we doing that's wrong that we sit there and say we need a fix? Right. We address, we doesn't mean we don't have problems. We do have problems. We do have things that we got to work on. But is that the answer to all the problems?
Well, Doug Christiansen, it has been a great first year for you on the job at the ECAC. I'm sure we will have many more of these conversations at Frozen Fours in the future. We thank you for coming over. Enjoy this week. It's a great time for college hockey, as we always say, but enjoy the week.
I will say this, though. Comparatively to Steve, we didn't have to turn his microphone way up, though. His voice carries a lot louder than Steve.
I was just trying to make sure that everybody heard me.
This is my 3rd year doing this, and he came with a lot more Steve we had to listen to, a lot more in depth.
Well, hopefully you listen too. But maybe it's 2 venti coffees before you come. Jokes aside, thanks so much for having me. This is great. This is fantastic for all of us to be able to talk about our leagues, and appreciate all that you do, and look forward to continuing to grow the league grow college hockey with all of you.
Well, thank you, Doug.
And we're going to take a break. We'll come back with NCHC Commissioner Heather Weems when we continue. Welcome back to USCHO Live. It's Thursday at the Frozen Four in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it's our chance to talk to a lot of the folks involved in college hockey. I'm Ed Trefsker with Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley. And Jim, why don't you bring in our next guest?
Yeah, this has become a little bit of a parade of commissioners today. You send out a bunch of emails, and then you get the times are always chosen almost right in a row. But Heather Weems, the commissioner of the NCHC, congratulations on another great season for your league, another great championship right here in St. Paul. Take us through the year. What was it like?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations to the University of Denver. Great to have them representing us here in St. Paul. Always more fun when you're here with the team playing. So, obviously another great year. I think the parity across our league and across college hockey continues to be at just such an incredible high. And just the talent that teams are able to attract and continue to develop just is so impressive. So, we obviously throughout the season, the last half had just a tight race. Really, North Dakota shored up their Penrose Cup a little bit earlier, but really the 2 through 6 positions were up in the air until the end, and everyone was fighting for seeding and for our conference tournament. So again, just great to see that level of talent and just the games counting from start to finish.
Yeah, it did feel like that stretch run, and you had a 7th place team that literally 2 weeks left in the season could have gotten home ice and was fighting for that right to the end. I mean, 1 and 8 kind of settled themselves out, but everything in between became an accordion. It probably made for some tense situations when you were thinking about who's going to qualify for the tournament.
It certainly did, and it certainly made some tense situations. Every call we had with our officials was every call matters because they're all fighting for the points. Watching the pairwise week in and week out, that 10 through 16 spot, I think we had 4 teams that were consistently in that group, and you would look at it one night and it would change to the next night, and it was just incredible. So yes, high energy games. The kids brought all of their passion and their energy to each of the games, and just wanted to place. They wanted to have home ice. They wanted to be in a great position.
You are in year number 2, have just completed kind of year number 2. How have you found this position as commissioner, and what have you felt has been some of the growth points for this league?
Certainly just for myself, just having a year under your belt, I think every time you have a cycle and you just begin to understand what it looks like. The tournament this year in terms of preparations and that sort of thing was a little bit more smooth. You just know what to expect. And obviously we partner with the Excel Center and the Wild staff, and they do such a fantastic job. They make it easy for us. So I think that that's important. I think the biggest thing, and I would say this is not just the NCHC, but across college hockey and really across NCAA sports, we are in such a critical kind of pivotal point of what the future is going to look like, and trying to anticipate and be ready for those changes and adapting to what the portal has become and what NIL is being discussed and where that goes. That impacts all of us, and it impacts how our coaches operate. And I look at them, and it used to be, coaches would get done with the season and they'd have a little bit of time and they'd have their player meetings and then they would kind of turn the corner to next year. And, they get done on Friday or Saturday, and on Monday they're hitting their recruiting trail because, they've got player meetings to figure out who's staying, and they've got time, to figure out who's out there. So it has changed. And I mean, I will be honest, I worry about that from just a health standpoint and a family time standpoint. Like it's a grind, and our coaches, and our programs, they're always on now.
That makes it difficult. Go ahead, Derek. I think you had a question to follow up here.
I appreciate that from a coach's aspect, because it has changed in the last couple of years of where things are going in our business. But we're down here in St. Paul, an unbelievable area, and you've got your championship here, but your championship is leaving.
Yeah.
One more year here next year.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about what this area means to hockey and your championships and this area and leaving this area, how that came about, and obviously it had to be a hard decision.
Absolutely, and to be honest, it was bittersweet for me. I've been coming to this area from the WCHA days when I was at the University of Denver early in my career, and it's just then when I moved to Minnesota and became familiar with what the state of hockey actually means. I've joked with a couple of people, I've got 4 boys, all of them have played hockey. I've still got 2, one who plays in high school, one who's bantam. And hockey in this state is accessible and it's available, and it's the thing to do. I mean, my bantam player, and people will fall over, but I paid $750 for ice shoes this year. Which
not
is
bad.
Not bad.
That's like a week for. I have 3 that play AAA. That's like a week.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we have the luxury, but it's the Wild staff, and it starts at Matt Maka. And Matt Maka with the Wild, in his CEO position, understands what hockey means to the state of Colorado, or to the state of Minnesota, and he is so dedicated to making St. Paul the place to be. And it starts with the girls tournament at the end of February, and then you have the boys tournament early in March, and then you have the Frozen Face-Off, and then obviously this year the Frozen Four. Again, it's bittersweet because people have been coming to this area for a college tournament for 30, 40 years. And Mike C and I were actually talking about it. He said when he worked for the Wild in the early 2000s, that if you would have said to me that, in a few years or 20 years, you wouldn't even have a college hockey tournament here, it'd be bittersweet. Now for us, creating that excitement and putting butts in seats and for the student athlete experience, we think that home sites, campus sites throughout our tournament will be a benefit. We'll be able to cater with a league that's as spread out as we are. We'll be able to cater and take it to the fans in a different sort of way.
Another change you've got coming to the league next year is the first addition to the league, Arizona State. So you got a few changes there. You've got the scheduling pods and the 3 sets of 3. What are the preparations like for that change to the league?
We're really excited. Obviously Arizona State brings a lot of strength and just talent. Again, we think that it's mutually advantageous to both of us. We think they'll get some benefit in recruiting and just notoriety and consistency and be able to build up some rivalries. We'll obviously be able to do the same. And trust me, everybody involved from the staff, officiating, media perspective has all told me that they'd be happy to host down in Tempe a couple times during the winter. But in terms of just building that, a lot of it was figuring out what the playoffs would look like, including, Arizona State, 19. I think the three pod system works well. So we have an East pod, a Central, and a West. It makes travel a little bit easier. They're guaranteed 4 games against those in their pod, which minimizes the number of times you get on a plane. And I think that'll be positive. And again, you always want to be ready for growth. You want to be in a place where, as the world changes around you, you continue to build and build with quality. I mean, once again, we love, and I know it makes the coaches pull their hair out a little bit during the year when it's so competitive, but what our fans love is just the quality hockey every night, and we think Arizona only contributes to that.
Can you take us through the process of how you got them into the league? I look at most of your schools, a lot of D2 schools in there. You've got some mid-major schools in there, and then you end up with one of the largest student bodies in the country and one of the largest athletic programs in the country.
So many of you know that we started that conversation probably in 2015, 2016,
right.
Many years ago. They didn't have a facility at the time. They were brand new, elevating from a club program. And we were relatively new as a conference as well. And so I think, after we talked to them, after we looked at it as a league, we wanted to get some stability underneath us before we started looking at expansion. Over the course of the last 10 years, we've been able to do that from a financial standpoint, just from a competitive standpoint. We've solidified where we're at. And so, we always kept Arizona State kind of in the conversation. And then once they announced that, they had the funding for Mullet Arena and they had a plan and it was clear that the university and the community was making a commitment, we were able to continue that conversation. And, I think for them and some of the rivalries, certainly with Colorado College and Denver, it makes sense. That's about as easy as a trip as you can get for them. And even I think from a recruiting perspective, not just hockey, but visibility for the institutions, it's nice to have some programs that have some Western reputations and that sort of thing. So, our schools felt really good about that. Our Eastern schools, maybe a little bit on the front end, we're nervous about what that would do with travel. But I think that, once we figured out the pods and we could give them some stability in terms of the additional expenses or that it would be relatively flat, they jumped on board. And I think that certainly what Arizona State understood and wanted was, as Greg Powers said, it's hard when you're in the beginning of February and you're just outside the pairwise rankings and you know that you're not going to play the sort of competition that's going to move you up, and you're trying to keep your student athletes motivated. Yeah. And I mean, certainly the independent route is a hard one. And so getting them in and having that opportunity, and they knew the quality and the focus. They're excited that in the NCHC, we are a hockey business. We love what we do. We put our student athletes first. And we have quality, from top to bottom. So I think that it just, while they're different in terms of the look of their footprint, certainly I think from a commitment to hockey and ensuring that, they can be competitive and successful across the board, they're excited.
Any other potential conversations about expansion? I know 9 is an odd number. Commissioners sometimes don't like odd numbers, but we have 2 other leagues with odd numbers in it. 10, is it a thought, or is it?
I won't say it's off the table. There's nothing seriously being contended right now. I mean, I think we always want to be aware of what's out there, and certainly as the NCAA shifts and things change, we want to have our finger on the pulse, but nothing at this point.
When we talked yesterday with Steve Metcalf from Hockey East, he mentioned how the various backgrounds of the different commissioners, and all of you fairly new in the positions. I mean, he's in his 4th year, and he's the elder statesman of the group. He mentioned how different backgrounds, whether it's administration or as athletic directors or as coaches, really have given a well-rounded group of commissioners. What's the working relationship like among that group of you?
I actually agree, and I think that's a great point. It's been really fascinating. In the year's time, I like to say I'm a good observer, to kind of see how things work. And I would agree. He hit that on the head. You've got Doug, who you just talked to, who certainly from his USHL background and as a former player, brings one perspective. You've got those of us who've grown up in college sports, college hockey, with another perspective. You've got Don Lucia at the table, who certainly from a coaching perspective has the pedigree to understand. And so I think that we do a great job I think as colleagues, we're very supportive of one another. I think we push each other in different sorts of ways. And I think particularly given just the time period that we're in and the changes that are happening, I think it's really important that we have those different voices, that we're continuing to look at all angles and what do we need to stay in front of, and how do we continue to have conversations that build and grow college hockey. And I would even say, just look at what's happened. I'll use women's basketball as an example. Like in the last couple of years, what they've done to increase and make themselves visible in a whole different way. I think those are conversations that we need to be having and are having about, you can't rest on laurels. You can't just be okay with status quo. What can we do to ensure that players see us and that fans see us as the best place to see not only college hockey, but hockey in general?
This is an interesting time with the ability to produce television on campuses, and you see almost everybody has some sort of a streaming deal, and NCHC TV was kind of the front runner on it all. You're the only league, though, that still stays away from a major kind of network. There's no ESPN Plus. There's no Flow Hockey. Is that something that's working really well for the league at this time, and is it something that you foresee ever changing?
It has worked very well for us this far, and certainly we have a longer-term contract with our current provider. I think we continue to watch what's happening. That industry as well is changing, and we want to stay relevant to our fans. We want to stay relevant in the conversation. But from a financial perspective, from a coverage perspective, we will have conversations in Naples this year about standards, production standards and those sorts of things. That's important to us to staying up. But for now, it has been, we've had a really good partnership with Sidearm and NCHC TV. Obviously, our work with CBS Sports and Dave Starman and Shireen and Alex Heinert has been fantastic. But again, we don't just get to sit back and say, well, done with that, checked it off the list. It's a conversation that comes up amongst fans, amongst our ADs, and we need to, like I said, remain relevant in that marketplace.
There does seem like there's a lot of rights money if you go with the bigger network that maybe you forgo by staying independent, I think.
I think that's certainly, and I don't know all of the agreements that we have in hockey across the league, and what those numbers are. I think that we financially have been very solid in what we've done, and that's enabled us.
You have some pretty good fan bases that we'll describe.
We have some pretty good fan bases. But, again, there certainly are opportunities, and we just need to keep our finger on the pulse.
I gave poor Doug Christiansen just the open-ended question, so he went right where I thought he would go, which was Major Junior. That's the big conversation kind of piece that seems like it's going to hit Naples this year. As he said, very far away from ever happening that Major Junior players would be allowed into college hockey, but how much discussion have you as a league had to have with your member institutions?
I think that it is. It's one of the major topics this spring across the hockey body, but certainly within our league as well. And I think that part of it is understanding all of the intricacies of what would happen, and the pros and cons on the various sides. And there are both. And depending upon what league you're in and maybe what school you're at, you have very different feelings. But I think we have to have a pretty complete understanding of it. I'm also going to say that I think we have to be prepared to make that shift, and I would prefer to be proactive and be able to go forward with some recommendations about. My fear a little bit is if you look at, I feel like with both the transfer portal and the NIL, that we, as in the NCAA or college athletics, we weren't prepared for those conversations. And so we opened up the floodgates and we went from here, and you on the radio can't see me, but we went from one end of the spectrum to the other. And it's hard to put the hay back in the barn, so to speak. And with the litigation that happens across the country, against the NCAA and looking at player rights and responsibilities, that universities have, I think we very seriously have to understand the implications of moving in that direction. And I would prefer that we begin to frame that as opposed to have someone else do it for us.
And that's what people don't understand. We've got the ability to shape it before it's shaped for us. And if we just sit here and put our head in the sand as a body, as coaches, as administrators, something's going to be shoved down our throats that we don't like. And I would rather say, hey, here's what our body wants compared to here's what is going to happen.
Absolutely, and I do, I continue to believe that hockey is unique, and we've had some conversation. We've got a meeting actually with President Baker and some of his staff coming up in a couple of weeks. The commissioners do, to talk about just governance in general, because hockey is, as single sport conference is, it sits outside of what is the general organizational structure. And in many ways, I think why that's so important to us and to hockey in general is that we do operate a little bit differently. No other sport has the junior development programs the way that they do. They don't have as much of the professionalization model that we do. Already we have our kids who go to the summer camps, developmental camps with the NHL. But we need to make sure that there's a framework to that, and that we're also protecting the student-athlete experience, the academic experience, and our relationships with our institutions. And so, much as you said, I think we do have an opportunity, and not just an opportunity, I think we have an obligation to frame that in a way that is positive for our programs.
And so when people say, hey, just let it happen, that's the wrong, in my opinion, I've been saying that's the wrong opinion to have.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
A lot on the table. I'm sure that Naples will be a fun place yet again this late April and early May. But
well, it's actually starting with conference calls and Zooms probably within the next week or so.
Well, also rules change here. So we've got trust me, I think all of our agendas are robust.
Well, the agenda ahead of us tonight is a big hockey game for Denver. I'm sure you're, as a commissioner, very excited for that.
She didn't even get to talk about her team playing tonight, Jimmy. You went all over the place.
She said she was very happy for them to be here.
I'm excited. I think that they're a younger team and they're on a great trajectory.
They really
are.
Are.
Just like you'd expect in the second half of the season as they grow up a little bit and develop. I think they're well positioned.
What's your prediction?
I got a Denver win.
Of course you got. If we found a commission that would say that their team is going to lose, I will see Santa Claus before I see that commissioner.
We'll ask Don next who's going to win. He'll give us a...
That's exactly it.
Well, Heather Weems, thanks so much for your time. Congratulations on another great season with the NCHC, and we look forward to doing this every year. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be back with more of USCHO Live and CCHA Commissioner Don Lucia when we return. Welcome back to USCHO Live. It's Thursday at the Frozen Four in St. Paul. I'm Ed Trepsker alongside Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley, and time for our next guest, Jim.
And a man who, in this area of the United States, needs no introduction. A former Minnesota coach, national champion with the Gophers, and now the commissioner of the CCHA, Don Lucia. Don, welcome in.
He had to wear sunglasses and a hat to get in here, so nobody knew who he was.
I went for a walk, so you got to give me some credit. I had some time to go. I went down 7th to Mancini's and back, so I got to get my exercise in every day I get ornery.
No, everybody's here. Is that Don Lucia?
Yeah, oh yeah.
This is obviously, a home for you. How nice is it when you get to see college hockey on the biggest stage return to the Twin Cities?
It's nice. It's just too bad we couldn't arrange the Eastern teams in Boston and the Western teams in Minnesota versus vice versa like we have now. But it's exciting. You go into that Expo Center and so many good college hockey memories, certainly for everybody. But
I got a bad one there.
Yeah, you probably do. But I certainly have a lot of good memories, whether it's 0-2, Blake Wheeler diving and scoring in a WCHA championship game. Some heartbreaks as well. That goes with it when you do it long enough. But it's a great venue. St. Paul's, hockey town, much like Boston, and so I'm one of those that's a proponent of. Both Boston and St. Paul need to be on that rotation for the Frozen Four, maybe every 4 or 5 years, because it's nice when you can go to a spot where you just kind of hunker down and you can walk everywhere.
Not bad, I'll tell you that. The CCHA, another great year. Your tournament, once again on campus sites, really banged it out. And that was some great atmospheres watching some of the highlights on TV.
Yeah, it really worked out well. I mean, we've been fortunate the 3 years we've done it. The semifinals and the championship game have been sold out. So Bemidji State did a great job this year. We tried to add to it a little bit. We separated our semifinals this past year for the first time, and it's like it finally dawned on me. It's like, why are we playing them at the same time? It makes no sense. And so everybody jumped on that. We had our highest rated viewership for our semifinals than we've had. And then certainly the championship game we did move to Friday night. And the method of the madness with that was we could be the first conference to punch the ticket. And also with the move of the NCAA tournament to a Thursday, if a team were to be on the road Saturday night, you have a 6-8 hour bus ride home after the game and you get home at 4 a.m, you might be leaving on Tuesday. It's a quick turnaround. So it gave our team or teams in the future a little bit added rest, and I think that was worthwhile because we know regardless Friday, Saturday, the game's going to be sold out. So it worked out well. We brought in professional broadcasters for it.
Right.
I think that was a good touch. We learned some things that, this year that we can do a little bit better, but they're all steps in the right direction for the CCHA.
No controversy this year either, huh?
Well, we weren't at Mankato's race. All because of Minnesota State, whether it's McNaughton Cup at the end of the year or the playoffs. It was kind of refreshing not to say what demon is going to come out of this rink down in Mankato, because we've had some crazy finishes.
There is, it's a nice story. I mean, Mankato is such a dominant team, and they continue, even without Meg Hastings there, to be a very competitive, and they will. We know that they're going to return to the top soon. But to see the team at the top, and to see the way Bemidji went on that run toward the end of the season, to go from middle of the pack, end up winning the regular season championship, that was pretty special to watch.
Yeah, and you're happy for those communities because one of the things that's unique about the CCHA is, for the most part, we're smaller markets, very much community involvement, where the smaller towns are really tied into the university, the alumni basis, so it really means a lot. And so you got a small town in Bemidji, I don't know what population, 15, 20,000, whatever it is, and you've got 4,500 people at the hockey game, and it was a great environment. Really happy for Bemidji. You're right, Minnesota State, they will be back. They got rated a year ago in the portal, but we can go on that subject for hours. But Luke and his staff, I thought, really did a nice job, as did Tom. They had a lot of injuries. First half of the year, missed the goalie for 2 months. I think they had 3 defensemen out. I think it was later in the year, Tom said it was the first practice they had their whole team together all year. And they took off. And they would have been a good representative had they made it. Just like Tech, I thought they had a great game against Boston College. Matter of fact, I thought they should have been ahead after 2 being at the game. Just couldn't convert on a couple of chances. Then, as we all know, BC give them a chance. Their skill level certainly takes over. And so it was a good year. We have to do better non-conference record-wise than we did this year. And that's something that set our teams back, and they're aware of that. So, you got to schedule wisely and schedule teams that are good, but you have a chance to beat at the same time.
I guess that's what we talk about this on our Monday show all the time, and how coaches build schedule. And Derek always gives his input, and I hear from my coaches that I deal with in Hockey East how they're trying to build toward the pairwise. It's difficult to put together that right schedule. How much as a conference body do you even have those discussions?
Well, we had it early on when I first came on board, because we had some teams that they had too much of an imbalance in home and away non-conference. we all know it's a lot more difficult to win on the road than it certainly is at home. I do understand sometimes you have to go get a guarantee, and you maybe to be bought for a series. But at the same time, I mean, you can't be giving away all your games because it has an adverse effect on every other team in your league.
Right.
And so if you're going to play, in our instance, 8 non-conference games, I mean, although it's not mandated, you know, it's pretty well been addressed that you better, over a couple-year period, have 50 at home, 50% at home, and 50% on the road. We're not going to be the type of league where you have, you know, 80% at home. But let's face it, you know, some leagues, you know, 75, 80% of their non-conference games are at home, and that's an advantage. It's not only an advantage for that team, but it's an advantage for the whole conference, because if every member of the conference has the majority of non-conference games at home and they win 70%, well, it drives up every team in that conference's index. So there is a method to the math.
Yeah, there certainly is. You said it already. You brought up the transfer portal. That is something that smaller leagues, it feels like they get beat up in the portal a little bit more than some of the bigger conferences. Just thoughts on it. It's a difficult and it's a very touchy subject these days.
Yeah, it is. When I look at that, one of the great things in college hockey, you know, I've been on a Division II school. People forget I haven't been, you know, a Silver Spoon at Minnesota my whole career. I was at Colorado College for 6, a Division III school, and then a Big Ten school. So I've been on every side. But the beauty of it, hey, I remember being at Fairbanks as an independent, winning at Michigan State. At Colorado College, a Division III institution, playing for a national title back in '96 against Michigan.
Right.
And then being at Minnesota. But the beauty of our sport has always been those teams, Division II, Division III, non-BS, had a great chance to cycle up and compete at the highest levels. And we've really seen that the last 10 years, whether it's Yale and Union, UMD's great run they've had here. And I brought this up. I mean, I'll use some examples. Fair State in 12. Chris Kunitz was a pretty darn good player. Would he have been at Fair State through his senior year today? And if not, would they have been in the Tampa Bay Frozen Four?
Right.
You know, so, or Union. They had, not only when they won it, they had a great team, but that was a 3-year team. They won the ECAC 3 years in a row, the playoffs 3 years in a row. Would they have gotten rated?
Right.
So that's my concern, that the halves are going to, the divide is going to continue to grow, and not so much from the initial recruit, like even NIL money. I mean, it's going to start in hockey. There's a good article in the Star Tribune yesterday, I think, touching on that subject. It's really not there a lot, but it's there. And, you know, the big schools, if they give somebody an extra $25,000, I don't care. They're still going to get the same players. It just might cost them more. My concern is what's happening in the portal. These deals are being done December, January, not at the end of the year.
Right.
Kids are jumping in the portal. They already know where they're going. Don't call me. So if you're a school that has an opportunity to recruit the best players for the most part, and then you can go recruit the best players off other programs, not only does it help you, but it decimates those programs. And so that's where it becomes more difficult for, you know, Bemidji State as a CHA member went to the Frozen Four with Matt Reed and those guys that went on to play in the NHL.
Right, Brad Hunt.
And you need those types of players. RIT going to the Frozen Four, and all of a sudden, you know, years back, their 2 best players are gone. And so you build to have that high cycle, but now you don't get a chance to have that high cycle if your players are going to get taken through your program. And then we all know on the flip side what happens. Guys get nudged out, right? We got to make room for this kid out of the portal, so my 4th or 5th line guy magically disappears.
Is agent involvement in that whole thing
there's
an issue?
No doubt that what goes on now is
advisor.
Yeah.
Whatever the word is.
Call them if you want, but what goes on now is an agent will call a school and say, do you have a scholarship if my guy jumps in the portal? Yeah, sure. It's not supposed to happen, but we all know it does.
Right.
You know, the NCAA really doesn't want to get involved in that. And so, that's the hard thing. So then it becomes, how can those other schools remain competitive? How can you continue to backfill your roster? And that's the conundrum for probably 50 schools right now. And you can I mean, you're starting to see it. I mean, this is 3 years in a row at Michigan in the Frozen Four. Minnesota's been 2 out of 3. BU's been 2 out of 3. Denver's been 2 out of 3. You can go back not long ago, and we had a Frozen Four of St. Cloud, Quinnipiac, Yale, and Lowell.
2013, yeah.
You know, so there you go. And I hope it doesn't go back to where just the same dozen teams really have a chance to win it or get to a Frozen Four, because it means so much to these communities when they can have that special year. And you're starting to see it in basketball, the mid-majors, right? No, top 16 teams in the March Madness were all Power 5 conference teams.
Right. So the other way to combat that would be to make the player pool bigger.
I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Here it goes.
So we've asked the question to numerous people, numerous commissioners, make the player pool bigger with major junior. There's been pushback. There's been can happen, yes can happen, it's far away, it's close.
I am 100% in favor of increasing the player pool, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when you got quarterbacks making $1 million a year in college athletics, who are we to tell a kid he can't get paid $400 or $500 playing junior hockey?
Right.
That's number one. Number two, who are we to tell a kid development path is? That's on the individual. So this is not an NCAA rule. This is a hockey-specific rule that was put into play. In the old days, they called them schoolboy contracts. So kids could play major, junior, and go to college, but they signed different contracts. But that's beside the point now. I believe strongly that if we open up the player pool, and I'm not just talking about the Canadian Hockey League, I'm talking about Europe, where a kid could be a senior in high school playing in his local club team. He gets called up to the pro team because they have injuries. He doesn't necessarily want to go, but he goes and plays for 6-8 games, and then he gets sent down when the injuries are done. That kid should be eligible to go to college. Why do we want to limit a young man's ability to go play college hockey? It makes no sense to me in the climate we're in now, and it allows the team, as we talked about, to backfill. So if I'm Bemidji State and Eric Polkamp, who's a first team all CCHA player as a freshman, now he's going to Denver. Bemidji State has to have the ability to go find a player, maybe not at that level, but a pretty good player. And by having a bigger player pool, you're going to have those abilities. And I've heard the argument that, well, all these top players aren't going to go to college. I call BS to that. You telling me that a kid, if he was a major junior, Owen Powers, or you name these high-end guys, they're going to go back to major junior at 19, or they're going to want to come to college? They're going to want to come to college. I mean, look what we provide the kids. And not to mention, they might get paid more at some schools than what they would certainly be getting in major junior. So I believe, and I talked to some agents, I've talked to NHL people, instead of a 30% of the players in the NHL from college, I think you'll see it over 50, because I think that will become the path to the NHL. Junior hockey, to college hockey, to the NHL, and I can even make the argument college hockey may get younger because you're going to pull more 19-year-olds out of these areas rather than 21-year-olds.
So you're in favor of it, obviously, as you can see it. How close is this, in your opinion?
I'm not saying it's close. I do think there's a lot of, what happens to the first person that files a lawsuit?
Well, then it's happening.
Because you've seen it in every other lawsuit with the NCAA, with the portal, the ability to NIL money.
Multiple transfers.
Multiple transfers coming. So I do think it's inevitable. When? I don't have a crystal ball. Hopefully sooner rather than later. I think too many people are worried about the boogeyman under the bed or what may happen, instead of how is it bad if we have more and better players in college hockey. Nothing can convince me that that's not better for college hockey.
I think we've hit a lot of good topics here. What do you see as some of the other stuff you want to discuss in Naples this year?
From a rules standpoint, the topic is how do we define goaltender interference? Because it is the bane of every official, the bane of every commissioner, the bane of every coach. Because as we all know, either we have to modify the rule, or what coaches won't do is accept the fact that sometimes that call is going to go your way and sometimes it's not. And one set of officials will see it as a goal. You could have a different set of officials who will see it as no goal. Not only in college, but in the NHL as well. And they have a war room that, does it all at the same time. So that to me is a very difficult, and it's hard on the officials. You get the phone calls the next week. How is that a goal? This last week it wasn't. That's the negative of video replay. I do hope, and there's a lot of talk that we do make, like the NHL, any replay, if you're wrong, it's a minor penalty. You can't use your timeout.
You want to put it right into peril right away.
Correct.
Less challenges.
Less challenges. I think we've done. We do have fewer challenges right now with taking that forcing the offside piece of it, or too many men on the ice, I should say, out of it.
Then we have to put technology on the bench. Then
I don't care. I mean, I don't care about that. If you want to do that, that's fine. But everybody has their guy upstairs,
right,
and they're headphoned in, and they're looking at every coach is delaying it as long as he can, talking to the official until he gets the okay, challenge it or no. We all know what goes on there. So I think I think in many ways our game's in a good spot. I mean, like this Frozen Four, I think is going to be terrific. We've got 4 outstanding teams, the 4 highest scoring teams in the country. It should be a really exciting weekend for our fans. So from that standpoint, but I don't see a lot other than what's happened around our game with some NCAA issues that we're dealing with right now. And people are going to be on each side of the fence with that. Some teams are going to want home games in the NCAA tournament. That's going to be a difficult lift because you're going to have teams that say, let's say, you can pay players, you can take players off our roster, and now you want home games in the NCAA tournament. So I think that's going to be a difficult sell. But I hope that as we move forward, like I want to know where our game's going to be in 5 years more than, where we're at right now with things that are going on with the NCAA right now. Because unfortunately, like I run into Jerry York, or hopefully I'll see Jackie this weekend. Guys have been around it. Rick Calmey's the AD in our league. We all got into the game because we love what we did. I was fortunate that in my career, every day I went to work, I enjoyed going to work. Now, there were some tough days going into work after a difficult loss, but you love what you do. I see a lot of coaches right now aren't having fun because of the portal and everything. And the whole, our sport, a lot of blue-collar guys, small town guys that grew up, went on to play college hockey, that are in the coaching profession because they love it. But it's getting more and more difficult because of, some of the things that have transpired from an NCAA standpoint. Through nobody's fault. Right. It's just where we're at right now. I hope we don't get like basketball where, can I get $500,000 to come here? Or I'm a quarterback. I'm leaving because I can make $1 million at this other school. And that's what's happening right now. And that gets back to the whole opening the pool. I mean, I still haven't heard somebody give me an explanation how you can justify the guy can't make a few $100s wherever he's at, and guys can make $1 million playing college sports.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, there will be a lot talked about down in Naples, and I'm sure we'll continue to follow.
Prediction?
Prediction for the weekend tonight. There you go.
Boy, I still think BC will win tonight. I think they're deeper, and they may have the best goalie here this weekend. I didn't realize Fowler was that good until I went out there. I was worried. I mean, BC's got a lot of freshmen, and history says you kind of get dinged with all those freshmen, but they're pretty high end. I remember a guy named Thomas Vanek was pretty high end and brought us to a title as a freshman.
Buffalo, right?
Yep, and DU, and I think BU is going to be a heck of a game. I'm just looking forward to the flow of the game, the back and forth. Both BU's assistants were former players of mine at Fairbanks, Tavis, and Dallas. So if I'm rooting for anybody, it's probably them, just because of that connection way back when.
Well, we appreciate your time, your candor, especially on you took that major junior issue head on and did a nice stuff.
Everybody else is
no dodge in that one.
Tap dance around it.
You know what? That's just my belief. Now, people can tell me I'm full of it. I don't care. I mean, it's my opinion. I mean, I've been around enough to know that the pool's got to get bigger if college hockey is going to continue to grow. And who doesn't want half the guys in the NHL coming from college?
Yeah, true. Well, John, let's hear. Enjoy the weekend, and we will catch up with you again next year. But thanks for everything you do for college hockey.
And thank you guys for everything you do for college hockey, because I'm certainly on your website an awful lot, checking out things and good articles. So it's fun to have passionate people involved in our game, like CHM.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back with Big Ten's Adam Augustine on USCHO Live. Welcome back to USCHO Live. It's Thursday at the 2024 Frozen Four in St. Paul. I'm Ed Trefsker with Jim Connolly, Derek Schooley, and we've been going around the different conferences. And Jim, Commissioner Day. Jim, why don't you do the honors here?
So I'm gonna skip the long title. I'm just gonna go and say the Commissioner of the Big Ten, Adam Augustine. I know you have a longer title than that, but I'm just gonna keep it simple. I said you said you're okay with that.
I like the sound of hockey, Commissioner. Yeah, I'll take that.
That's totally fine. Hey, Michigan, great to have them back in another Frozen Four. That's a rooting interest for your league today.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they've had such a great run here these last few years. If you looked at that team a couple months ago, I don't know who would have guessed that they'd be the ones sitting here from the Big Ten. We certainly had a strong year. I think, 1 through 7, this is the strongest that I think we've ever seen the Big Ten, quite frankly, evidenced by Ohio State going into Madison and winning that series in the first round. But you just can't say enough about what Brandon's done here in his second year with Michigan.
It's incredible. It's fun to watch. They said that will be a great game against Boston College in the nightcap tonight. We've been kind of going around highlighting seasons. Your championship this year, going back, you're in the roots of the campus sites, getting out of these big buildings. It seems to be the Western approach to things. The Western leagues like that very much. How did you feel that the championship went for you guys?
Yeah, so I think if you take out the 2 COVID years, I think this was the 5th year we've played out our tournament format through to completion. 3 of those 5 years we set building attendance records. The only reason it wasn't a higher number was one. Minnesota came up just a little short of their record-setting number the second time they hosted, and Michigan State said too many renovations to Minn to get back to that number they had back in the 80s or 70s or whatever it was. But the common theme has been, whether the building's been around for 10, 20, 50 years, people keep coming back to us and saying, this is the best atmosphere we've either ever seen in this building or it's the best atmosphere we've seen since the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s sound like. And, I grew up going to the Coliseum back in the 80s and the 90s. I mean, that's my background in this sport. My family had season tickets Friday night, top row of the Dane County Coliseum. And that's, there's a straight line from that experience into sitting here today. And so to me, it means something to be able to give fans that home game, to bring meaningful games to the fans, let them see their teams celebrating with the trophy on the ice. And like you said, the Western side, geography is just a fact. Teams are further apart. There are fewer sites that bid for say, regional sites, things like that. Even when it came time in those first 4 years, we tried going back and forth between St. Paul and Detroit. We simply found that, at the end of the day, depending on which teams advanced, you weren't necessarily guaranteeing yourself a crowd and an atmosphere. So, I'm happy for folks like Steve, Hockey East. Again, it makes sense to them geographically to bring their tournament to a single focal point. This year was like the best case scenario for them with 2 Boston schools, Maine. I mean, it was tremendous.
It was a great atmosphere.
And that's phenomenal, and it's great for college hockey. I think what we have found is just, given the nature of our geography, that it's more of a regional to national footprint, at least in terms of college hockey, it makes sense to bring the games to the fans.
It does. What's it like to have
obviously Red Berenson does a lot with the Big Ten, and what's it like to have Red as a ambassador of college hockey for the Big Ten?
So especially these last few years, I think, we've really transitioned the way that we've administered the sport the last few years, and Red was a key part in kind of helping us take that step forward. I think if I'm being honest, look, I've been at the Big Ten since we started hockey back in 2013. I think it would have been fair for folks from the outside to question our commitment to it at various times throughout the years. And bringing in somebody like Red, who has experienced the game, is a legend at basically every level of the game, brings immediate credibility, and to have his voice in the room and kind of let us get our legs under ourselves and now be able to have kind of a new, renewed internal focus within the staff that we have. I think that was tremendous to be able to kind of use that bridge.
How have you seen the Big Ten's influence in college hockey? Obviously, the only all-sport conference that exists. You're the seat at the table, as they say in the NCAA. How have you seen over this decade or so, a little more, that Big Ten has been able to have some influence and have the ability to assist the other 5 conferences?
Yeah, I think, again, honestly, I'd call it a mixed bag at times. There have been times where, really one of the only times that I guess the Big Ten really kind of tried to utilize that opportunity was, delayed enrollment years ago. We know how that all went, and certainly not a chapter we need to revisit for long here. But that was one example. But I think part of the learning of that was, at its best we can be a voice, an avenue for college hockey. But I think, quite frankly, it just helps illustrate that college hockey is a different animal than other sports. You have all these single sport conferences that really at this moment don't have the same direct voice with the NCAA. They don't have the same direct representation, and from the national level, this is probably a sport that should be looked at a little differently.
We were just talking about that with Don Lucia, and he kind of referenced the fact that the 5 conferences that have no true representation. Is that something you feel it needs to be looked at by the NCAA as a way to maybe, can we change this? Can we find a way to make hockey a little different than all of the other ways, the other sports and the ways we govern them?
So, personally, yes. I think, if you look at kind of the work that was done by the Transformation Committee a few years ago, one of those recommendations that they had put forward was that we should have sport-specific oversight committees. And, for a variety of reasons, the NCAA opted not to go down that road so far. So right now you have football, men's and women's basketball that have that opportunity, and the other sports don't. And, I think there's a good argument to be made that if you were going to expand that sort of governance structure to other sports, I think hockey would be very well positioned and well deserving of that type of opportunity. And I think there are a few other sports out there that have demonstrated similarly, maybe the baseballs and softballs of the world. But, I think hockey is a different environment. It's multi-divisional, it's these, single sport conferences, and that's part of what's given it its charm and makes it what it is.
The Big Ten has had some membership changes with the whole landscape. Right now it's still 6 full members and the associate member in Notre Dame. Any opportunities there to expand the footprint of Big Ten hockey?
You didn't think you were going to get out of here without
that's a default question. I think there are a few ways to look at that. One, obviously if any of our current member schools wanted to add the sport of hockey, they know they have a home. That's always going to be the initial focus. And again, if somebody wants to go down that road, and I appreciate folks like, I know you had Mike Smee on here earlier. I appreciate the efforts they have all around the country, including occasionally at Big Ten institutions. So certainly that's one avenue, and if it ever comes to fruition somewhere, we'd be excited to welcome them. Beyond that, it's sort of like conference membership at any level. Your eyes are always open, and if you're standing still, then you're probably doing something wrong. So, we've been with 7 now for what, 6 years or whatever, since Notre Dame joined in 17-18.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look back on the impact that they had on our league. Quite frankly, I think our teams were probably underperforming by then. I think if you look at, say, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, they were probably having historic down periods for them, relatively speaking. The hockey product just wasn't quite there. Notre Dame walked into our league and just absolutely rolled through everybody the first half of the season. It was truly something to watch, and I think it forced everybody else to look around, get better. Culminated with 3 teams making it to the Frozen Four the last time we were here. I won't go through how that ended because we've had a lot of those stories in the last 10 years too. But again, I think there's a nice line you can connect from that addition to where we are today. Where again, perhaps this year it's only one Big Ten team in the Frozen Four. I think at the end of the day that's sort of your goal each season. You want you need a lottery ticket to win that trophy, come Saturday night in April. But, getting back to your question, no, I think it's something we will always be looking at and always have our eyes open to, but, nothing imminent on the horizon by any stretch.
I'd love like West Coast. I mean, like UCLA, USC. That'd be a great trip. I'd love those trips.
I mean, who doesn't want to walk out of a drink and see some palm trees?
Yeah,
right? Isn't that why we all love Tampa?
That's right. That's why I keep going to Arizona. It did feel that Illinois was really close, and then COVID happened.
Right.
Is that something that those discussions started or getting closer to restarting?
I think you'd have to defer to Illinois. I know Josh made some statements on that maybe within the last year or so, just saying kind of formally closing the door because I know it was a question that he was getting a lot. But, again, obviously a lot of groundwork was done to start down that path. And, again, maybe it's a conversation that comes back up, but no, nothing imminent right now.
How about the big topics that we've been talking with a lot of these commissioners? I'll kind of hit head on the major junior issue. Don Lucia was very adamant that we need to expand the player pool, particularly with all the player movement with the portal and in teams, losing players and thus. Where do you feel that the Big Ten sits on major junior?
So I think it's a very interesting question. I think, I'm curious. I think it breaks a little bit generationally amongst coaches, and I think it, quite frankly, everybody's looking out for how would this impact my program? And so, I think a lot of the first questions that come in when you're looking at some of our programs are, what is the impact on some of these first round type talents from Canada, the Adam Fantillis of the world and like that. Will they still come south and play college hockey? Would they still choose to go through, the USHL or whatever the case was for their particular path? And those are all fair questions. I tend to agree a little bit with Don that, again, the landscape has changed a lot since, 1987 or whenever the current language went into effect. The pace of changing college athletics within the last few years is just startling. I mean, mind-boggling. If you were to take a step back and think where we've come from where we started, where we were when you guys started in this industry, I mean, it's hard to be able to try to say that these are still completely tangible barriers and differentiators now between these leagues, between the resources that are being available to people. So, at some point, I think it's something, it's something that, knowing the kind of where this came from, the Transformation Committee handed it off to the Modernization Committee. They brought it to the hockey community. It's a great conversation for us to have. These are the right questions for us to be asking. I don't know that there's a consensus one way or the other, or quite frankly, it's probably being more concerned about what would happen. And a lot of people wondering kind of what would the unintended consequences being. But it's absolutely the right conversation to be having because, again, I wonder how long this would be tenable.
And I think one thing that you could agree with, and Heather Weems talked about it, is if the first time there's a lawsuit, I think there's a body you'd rather get out in front of it before it's shoved down your throat, unfortunately.
I mean, I think I said on one of our recent calls with that group, any of us who have been around college athletics long enough know that it tends to be the group reacting to some external force, whether it's litigation, legislation, whatever it may be, something outside of our control, and now we're reacting. And so, yeah, I think time is on our side right now. And I don't know how much longer that will continue to be the case, but right now we would have some control over this conversation, trying to map out what would be our parameters to make this work.
What would be best for us?
Right, and I think, now that's why I say now is the time to have the conversation then.
When we get into the topic of name, image, and likeness, the Big Ten is probably best positioned for its member schools in that area in college hockey. Maybe, take an ACC school like BC or something, but where does that head right now? When you see organizations like right here in St. Paul, you see over at the university that the whole Dinkytown collective they have for NIL. Where is that headed right now? Are we going to see maybe not the numbers that you see in basketball and football, but are we going to see some pretty big numbers for a lot of players at big programs?
I think it's hard to predict that piece. But I mean, part of it is, seeing where it fits within the scale of what somebody's options are at that age. If you choose to go sign your pro contract and end up in the AHL or end up being sent somewhere else, you're not making quite as much money as perhaps some people might think. And so, perhaps it's not the same dollar figure that you might need in basketball or football to perhaps change somebody's mind. But I guess even going back to kind of your premise, I'm not so sure that it's necessarily our schools that you'll see benefit the most from a world like this. I think where I think we're headed is a world where if a school and an institution truly wants to be competitive at a particular sport and they have, resources within their community to try to pool together, they may focus on hockey in a way that our markets may perhaps not. And so, again, it all remains to be seen, and I think hockey is a very important sport at, really all 7 of our institutions for their own reasons. But I just, the point is made often that, at our institutions, football and basketball tend to be, whether they're higher priorities, whether they're higher profile, pick whatever word you want. And hockey, again, is very high profile, very important, generates, crowds and revenue and all the like. But I will be curious actually to watch it play out. I don't take it for a given that it will necessarily benefit our programs ahead of anybody else.
I have asked, this is a softball question or not so softball question, what else is missing at Naples this year? What do you see? Rule changes, stuff like that you feel like might really come up and be hot button topics at this year's coaches meeting?
I certainly think, having talked to our coaches throughout the season, having talked to commissioners about what conversations they're having, I think a conversation on what goaltender interference is.
2 for 2.
Don,
you and Don back to back.
Yeah, I knew I liked Don. So, I think that we have to have a conversation and wrap our arms around this. I think we're putting our teams in a bad position where again, there's a lot of judgments in the play, and being an official is an incredibly hard job. I think we're putting the officials in a bad position by making it be sort of such a big gray area that and then I also think because of the way that replay works, I think what might frustrate the coaches the most and one of the hardest conversations to have is when they feel like the mistake was made on the ice in their mind. It's a wrong call. Now the official goes in the box, looks at it again, makes the same call. As far as they're concerned, the official just made a second mistake.
Right.
And it's kind of one of those, how can you watch it this many times and make the same mistake? And look, a lot of these are gray area where if you ask 100 people, it might be 70-30, it might be 60-40, whatever the case may be. There are times when I probably agree with the coach and would be in the 70 or 30% with them, but it's hard to explain why, but he was still within the official's reasonable judgment. He was still working within the framework of this rule. That's not a great position to be putting any of us in.
It's not, and it's interesting that has been the most brought up topic for rules. Adam Augustine, we're not going to ask you for a pick because we know he's going to pick Michigan. It's not worth it, but you should enjoy the hockey tonight. 2 great games, 4 great teams.
You could ask him Michigan's going to play in the finals.
We'll hold off on that. That's okay. But thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on, and enjoy the rest of this week in this great hockey city.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, guys.
And we'll be back to preview tonight's 2 semifinal games in a moment on USCHO Live. Welcome back to USCHO Live. Thursday at the 2024 Frozen Four in St. Paul. I'm Ed Tretzker with Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley, and now's the time to preview 2 games. And who better than to have someone who sees 2 of the teams quite a bit?
Yeah, the 2 favorites in this tournament, Boston College, Boston University. So we welcome in from the Boston Globe, Andrew Mahoney. I feel like this is becoming an annual spot at the Frozen Four when when there's a Boston team around, you're always right next to us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's definitely exciting.
Let's jump right into it and start. We'll go to the early game, BU Denver. Sometimes I'm not as concerned about what the favorites will do. I'm more concerned about what they need to avoid and what the other team is trying to do. What do you feel like is Denver's need tonight in terms of on ice and what they need to do to slow down this BU offense? And what does BU need to be most concerned about?
Well, I think certainly Denver can't lose track of Celebrini, and you don't want to let them get off to a fast start. That was, when you go back to the Beanpot, that was BC's fatal flaw, where after they shut him down through the two games, earlier in the year, just 10 days later, they play in that first round. Celebrini scores 2 goals in the first 5 minutes. BU finally gets a lead on BC for the first time in 3 games. And he got on track, and you could just tell that they were really feeling themselves. And so, I think, it sounds cliche, it sounds simple, but you really got to keep an eye on him and not let them get off to a fast start. In terms of BU's concerns with that, I think one of the concerns really, with BU sometimes is their defense. I mean, Lane Hudson's a talented offensive defensive, force, obviously, but I feel like some of those other guys, they make costly turnovers. I certainly don't want to single anyone out, but we've all seen it, and that's where they've kind of let teams get back into games when they've had leads. We certainly started against Minnesota, so I think that's probably the biggest thing. And you want to see what Massimo Rizzo has, and just how healthy he's going to be.
Derek, you and I were talking earlier how much special teams could come in. Do you feel like there's an issue with special teams in this game? Does one team seem to favor better? If there's a less power plays, more power plays, can you kind of handicap that?
I mean, that's certainly what the Hockey's championship game came down to, right?
Right.
But that was surprising because BU has been better on special teams, but that was eye-opening. I mean, Jay Pandolfo said after the game he thought 5-on-5 they were the better team against BC, but
I think it was 4 power play goals in that game.
Yeah, it was the first 4. It was 4 for 4, and
right.
BU was 0 for 4 on their first 4, and the one that they converted was towards the end of a 5-minute major when they were already down 5-1 late in the third. So typically, I actually think BU's really strong in special teams. I think that was an aberration. I don't think you'll see that. I mean, when you can have a power play, you can put Hudson and Celebrini out there together. Now you got Shane LaChance, just a big body that they like to put in front of the net on those power plays. It really can pose problems.
Let's go to the other side, Boston College in Michigan, the nightcap. Obviously, this BC team, a lot has been written about it, said about it. We've seen it. You and I have seen it throughout the entire season, covering Hockey East. But Michigan, a team that probably nobody thought would be here, maybe not even in the tournament 6 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
Here they are, and in yet another Frozen Four. What is BC most concerned about?
Well, I just feel like when you look at Michigan, I mean, this is their 3rd year in a row getting to the Frozen Four. If you look at the 4 teams, right, Denver was in it 2 years ago and wins the whole thing. BU was in it last year. And I just think BC, that would be the one concern I have is that, they haven't been to the Frozen Four in 8 years. We've seen the playoff intensity ratchet up and just how they played last week against Michigan Tech, 2 weeks ago against Michigan Tech, and then against Quinnipiac, who really gave them all they could handle and played a heavy game that BC really struggled with. I don't think Michigan can play that style of game. We'll find out today. I certainly think if Michigan saw that game, that's what they want to do. But it'll be interesting.
That's not a style change that is easy to make.
No, not at all.
Suddenly start playing the physical, and I don't want to even call it a trap game that Quinnipiac plays. They're aggressive with the way that they attack when they get the puck. But Michigan is more suited like a Boston College team. It feels like they are much more of what BC is.
Right, and so then you wonder, is BC just a better version of it?
Right.
So if it gets into a track meet like that, I mean, I kind of, when you look at BC with the 4 first-round picks and all the talent on the team, it did kind of remind me a little bit 2 years ago when Michigan came into Boston with the 7 first-round picks.
Right.
And, that carried them through the year, but then they ran into a tough Denver team in that semifinal. Again, I don't think Michigan can pose those kind of problems, but they do have experience on their side.
We're sitting here, and it's got to be the over in both games, right? You would think that, but then Denver goes and plays a couple 2-1 games. So, I mean, I'm looking for line charts on Twitter here or X or whatever you want to call it right now, just to see how many. If Rizzo's, he is playing, but if they're going 13 forwards, but you got to look at the over, right? These are going to be high-scoring games.
I would think so. I mean, I'm not anticipating 7-6 or anything like that, but yeah,
the over's 7, right?
I'm looking right now. Yeah, I got to pull it up.
I would. That's funny. I think that would be a push for me. I would think like a 4-3 kind of a game, So that's without even knowing that's what the over is.
6.5 on Denver BU. 7 is the over on Michigan BC.
I think I would probably take the over on both, but not that I'm expecting crazy games, but that was wild last week. 2 weeks ago to see Denver go in and hold the opponent to 1 goal, both games, both UMass and Cornell. I don't think anyone saw that coming, and I don't think Denver played a 2-1 game all year.
Not that they won.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. So, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the only thing I feel confident about is I'm not anticipating a blowout in either one of these games. I think we're going to see 2 great games. I think they're going to be really competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised with any combination coming out of this game for the championship game.
Do we have to take the time here as we all sit across here? I know we have a little bit of time left here, Ed, but should we start making picks at this point? And I guess we'll just start with our guests. The guests always go first. Do you have some feelings on this and reasons why?
I mean, I guess just because I've been covering them all year, and from what I've seen, the way that I've seen them, bounce back from adversity, just even within a game, like we saw with BC against Quinnipiac, falling behind by 2 goals, trailing by a goal late, only having 3 shots in the third period down a goal, and then just capitalizing on that 1 turnover and scoring in the last 5 minutes to even it up. So I'm gonna say the Boston teams find a way to set up an all Boston final, but again, nothing would surprise me.
Do you want to go ahead, Derek?
Derek's looking at me. He wants me to go next.
You know what? I told you this all day. I know there's going to be an upset. I just don't know where it's coming from. Because I like the top 2 seeds, but I just have this feeling there's going to be an upset. I just don't know which one. Am I going to bet against either one of the teams, the number 1 seeds? No.
Unless you want to throw money away. I mean,
no, but there's going to be an upset. There is. You're not going to walk out of here with BC and BU in the finals again. You're not. As much as Steve wants it, as much as you guys want it, it's not going to happen. But I'm not going to say it.
Okay. I don't know. So I'm trying to make the argument in my head about an upset, and I think back to Michigan winning that regional game over Michigan State and how they finished that game. And so if I have an argument, it's probably that. But having seen a lot of BC on TV and seeing BU up close and personal in the regionals, I just think those 2 schools, I've quoted Barry Melrose before. He says, will beat skill, but not when you got that much skill. I just think that the skilled players are going to step up in those games, and we see a BC-BU final on Saturday.
Well, and I would say, sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead.
I would say that while I agree with that sentiment, both BC and BU have a lot of will too. But if you are talking about an upset, I mean, you certainly have to like Denver's pedigree. They just know how to play in these big moments. Typically, historically, obviously this is a different team, but. We've seen them do this before.
But isn't it Michigan's time sometimes?
That was the point I was going to make here. if there is an upset tonight, it feels like Michigan. And I feel like this has been the Michigan team of their destiny. This is not the Michigan team.
A month ago, they weren't even in the tournament.
Right. This is not the Michigan team that had 7 first-round draft picks, went into Boston, and couldn't find a way to get past, was it Denver in that game? Michigan,
2 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, like, they couldn't find a way to get past. And that was a different team. I feel like sometimes when you have less pressure on you, and I'll use the gambling analogy, you're playing with the house's money a little bit, you just play a little looser. And BC, I guarantee, will come out tight. They did against Michigan Tech.
Because they're all freshmen?
They did, yeah, well, whatever the reason. You haven't been there before. They did it against Tech. They did it against Quinnipiac. I mean, it's dangerous, and that's one of those concerns.
You know, you made the point, Andrew, about this being a different Denver team, but I think that there's kind of this nice continuity of coaching pedigree there, where David Carl has learned from Guaz and from Montgomery, and he just gives this persona of being cool as a cucumber all the time, and you know. You can't. I've got to agree. You can't discount that. That's why making picks here.
Can you imagine if we had a Denver Michigan final?
Yeah,
I could.
I mean, listen. I've been watching BCBU all year, and I feel like we've been on this collision course that these two teams would meet for a national championship. But I still can believe that you have a Denver Michigan final possibility.
And it's not like we're talking about bad teams. They're number 1 and number 2 seeds.
When you mentioned David Carl, the word I always think of is unflappable. Just when you see him like that. It's interesting. I understand what you're saying, Jimmy, that BC's going to come out tight, but just watching the way things went down yesterday, BC looked really loose at that practice. They were really having fun. The Eagles were chirping, as you'd say.
Yep.
And then they were even kind of loose in the press conference. Michigan, my goodness, I made the mistake of asking. Yeah, I knew Marshall Warren from when he was at BC.
Right.
You know, I prefaced my question with like, "Hey, Marshall, great to see you again. You know, what are your emotions right now?" And he sounded like the Terminator. He said, right now I'm emotionless. Like he said that, you know, I haven't spoken with those guys. That there's no group text going on this week. You know, maybe afterwards there'll be some emotions going on. But he was locked in. He said they're in my way, and then he corrected himself and said they're in our way. So, but it was a weird. Not a weird, but it was an intense vibe at that press conference yesterday.
Well, we've seen Jerry York around this week. If knowing Jerry, and I've known him long enough, he probably has not said much to the team at all. He's not one of those guys that goes back
on the charter. I talked to Jerry.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe he's had some discussions and talks with the team, but for the most part, he's a guy that stays out of the way. He doesn't want to get in Greg Brown's way. But if you could just channel the looseness of Jerry York and all of his Frozen Fours. Yep. He was in those practices, if they made the national title game, that Friday practice was as loose as any practice you ever saw the Eagles play all season. So that's one thing, maybe that influence gets in there. I know Jack Parker's here. He's probably tried to put his influence and stamp in ways as well. We'll see where it comes out. I guess I'm the only guy that hasn't given it.
Well, I still
hemmed it hard. Yeah.
I just asked my RMU radio guy, Mike Pursuta, Michigan State alum. He would never pick Michigan. I said, "Who do you got?" And he said, just like everybody, he said BUBC.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go BUBC, but I'm going to preface it with saying I'm not surprised if there's an upset.
I will do it. I will go with BUBC to their detriment because we've been doing this together, the three of us, for 3 years.
And we're always wrong.
I've only gotten one game right ever. We're talking about I missed every semifinal. I missed every championship game until I decided to screw around last year, knowing that I believed that Minnesota was going to win. And I said, no, Quinnipiac 3-2 in overtime.
I remember that. Yeah, that was quite the call.
Yeah, well, it's because I was screwing around. I wasn't even trying.
Well, you should have said how many seconds into overtime.
I guess that was the call. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we're going to see overtime here today. That is the one.
And I'm going to go over. I'm going over on both games.
You're going over 6.5 and 7.
Yes.
How many periods? Over 7.5 periods tonight. Or over 7 periods.
No, I'm 6 periods.
I'm hoping for no overtime just because that second game is supposed to have an 8:30 start Boston time.
There goes your deadline.
That's going to be tight for my print deadline. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I will also throw a shout out to my Pittsburgh people. They got the RMU Robert Morris jerseys. I see some RIT jerseys in here, Ed.
Yep. Now, looking around his jerseys, I've seen Michigan Tech, Colorado College. I saw UMass Lowell earlier. I've obviously seen all of the 4 participating teams.
West Virginia club team.
West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
I saw 4 of those. Those people are from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Nice.
I mean, I could see a Bowling Green shirt across. I see an RIT shirt across. There's a lot
Neil
of
Broughton
Cloud. Neil Broughton.
Neil Broughton's here signing autographs. Do you believe in miracles?
I mean, I'm looking at, this is what I love about a Frozen Four, is to see how many fans come. I mean, we flew out of Boston yesterday. The people in back of us from Boston had North Dakota swag on. So, go figure with that,
We've given all of our wristbands and pens and pins away.
Yeah, we've done our best to give everything away, that's for sure.
And we're here. We're 2 minutes. What we got? A minute?
We
left?
got about a minute to kind of wrap things up. Tomorrow, 6 to 7, we're live, 6 to 7 Central Time, talking about the awards and talking about tonight's games, and that'll be right here at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub.
I am so excited about this. I think this is going to be great.
So listen, you don't get this many national championships sitting there in a Frozen Four that often.
28? That's pretty good, right? More than 50 draft picks. I mean, it's just
12 of the 15 top scorers in the nation.
And we're not even talking about Macklin Celebrini, who will be a draft pick.
Yeah, there's too much star power on those two teams. I'm locking my picks in.
So three of us go BCBU. Ed, did you give it official?
Oh yeah, I said BCBU.
Okay, 4 of us. We're all picking the same.
And then tomorrow when it's Denver, Michigan,
we'll have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it up here. Andrew Mahoney from the Boston Globe, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you have a game to cover on Saturday.
Yeah, hopefully.
We'll all do post-game. We got post-game wrap-ups.
Yep.
The 3 of us, 2 of us, whatever, after each game, YouTube, USCHO.
Yep. Visit USCHO.com for video, audio, and written coverage of everything going on. For Jim Connolly, for Jared Schooley, I'm Ed Trepsker. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. DCW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.